the Zoom meeting. That's about it for me.
I actually missed the meeting last week. I hit the wrong link.
And my problem now is a lot of them make you have a password in, so then you gotta go copy down the password. And
People that send it, they send a Google and a Google Meet.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, you have to remember to take that Google Meet out or whatever.
Right.
It happens to me all the time, but we have Teams and Zoom. And so it will send a Teams link and a Zoom link.
Right, so they got me at one time. Wow.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Name is Delquan Dorsey. I'm Community Engagement Coordinator, Supply Diversity Coordinator for Jefferson County Public Schools. And this is the Advisory Council for Racial Equity. We appreciate all the council members being here. We have a special guest, Dr. Marty Polio, Superintendent of JCPS, and we're very excited. But before we get started with our conversation with him, we are going to let our Chief Equity Officer, Dr. John Marshall, have a few words. So you can go ahead, Dr. Marshall.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ACRE committee that's virtual. There has been a lot of conversation and wait for the Chief Academic Officer. That announcement will be coming real soon. I am very pleased with who we have. I think this person will bring in a lot of energy. And this person was clear in the interviews, the expectation around addressing racial equity and the gap. Cannot disclose yet because it has not been official all the way internal and external, but when we get that person in place, we'll bring this person. I'm sure this person will have to go a lot of places and explain the strategy and plans that this person has, but this is something that I want to go on record to say, based on what I know, and the ranks from which this person comes from, has done some racial equity work, is unapologetic about the work. And I believe not just putting all academics on this person, when we get the things in place, we're going to see some mountainous gains. But I wanted to tell you all that first because this committee has been saying, John, when is the CAO? When is the CAO? So it's coming, Kumar, it's coming. And I'm very excited about that. And I believe that we have some potential to really do some good things. And this person knows that it's a mountain job with some things to put in place. So very soon, real soon, this will be announced.
Tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow
There
afternoon.
you go. That's the newest update, so.
Tomorrow afternoon, this is coming. So I'm looking forward to it and we'll get that person in front of the ACRE committee as well. So I wanted to get that out of the way because I think that's huge and long awaited. Back to you, Delphine.
All right, we're gonna go ahead. There's some people in the room. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I want Dr. Polio to go ahead and start us off with some context of where he feels like racial equity in JCPS, kind of like the current status. You could, for a few minutes, talk about that, and then we'll go ahead with our conversation. And council members, when we do, if you can introduce yourself before you ask your question, when we do get started with the conversation. But Dr. Polio, you go ahead.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to say I'm excited about the Chief Academic Officer. I think it's an important, really important part of racial equity. We put together, and it took a long time, we put together a committee of 12 folks that represented every division. I want to be clear, 2 from DEP, including Dr. Marshall was on it. JCTA was represented, administrators were represented. It took 2 rounds. We had 4 candidates, did not come to consensus, had 4 new candidates recently, and had a unanimous 12-0 vote, and without a doubt wasn't even close. And this person is extremely committed to racial equity, and I would think what she will bring to the table more than anything is her ability to implement a curriculum that is inclusive in all areas. So very excited about that, along with what I think is one of the biggest aspects of racial equity coming, which is the curriculum being now centered at central office. And so now it is not what we talk about a lot here, where we say we can influence SPDMs and like it or dislike it. This is not an SPDM decision anymore, what the curriculum is. And I believe rightfully so. Some disagree with me. I believe rightfully so. I believe that as a district, we should have a unified curriculum. We should have a unified curriculum on early literacy. We should have a curriculum for K-12 literacy and math, social studies, science, and we should be able to impact racial equity through curriculum at the entire district level. Now, we all know that when teachers go into their classroom, I mean, teachers are a curriculum is, essentially the standards you are supposed to teach as a teacher, the guidelines, how you teach it, when you teach it, all of those things becomes a teacher, decision to make. And I'm not here to say one classroom has to be exactly similar as the other one. But what I am saying is, I think we have conquered a lot when it's come to racial equity. And I think the mountain that is to climb is the really deep stuff, the implementation of curriculum in every classroom, not just a African-American history, a Black history class that's offered as an elective at a high school. I think that's important, and we accomplish that. Black student unions in every school is important. We accomplish that. But once again, I'll say having inclusive curriculum is important for every student, not just Black students. It's important for my daughter. She's a senior. This is her last go around, so she's out the door, but breaking my heart, but that is important for every student. And so, as Dr. Marshall likes to say, the fibrous part of this is not having racial equity and DEP being something over to the side, but being a part of every department, every division, and everything we do. So I think that's a huge step forward. It's a big semester for us. I think it will make more difference when it comes to outcomes for kids, when we have a unified curriculum and support. So I look forward to that implementation. I do want to talk a little bit about our student assignment plan that we recently passed, because I think it is critical and important. I've talked about it for a long time. Clearly, the families of West Louisville have spoken. Clearly, this is not, and that's what I wanted was for them. I want to congratulate and really identify our parent outreach team. As a part of the new student assignment plan, we said that every family in West Louisville will be making a choice. There is no default. There is no, I didn't fill one out. Okay, you have to go to the close to home school or the far away from school. They have now gotten to 92% of all choice zone families. And I will tell you, the incorrect narrative I heard throughout this whole thing was West Louisville families won't fill out applications. They won't be involved. They won't do this. They won't. And that is not the case at all. All we had to do, and it was hard, was to hire 2 or 3 3 to be exact, parent outreach specialists and go to the community. They did 34 different events in West Louisville. 34 events that get 92% of the families to make a choice. Yeah. At the elementary school level, 80% of the families chose to stay close to home, the choice zone option. At the middle school level, 80% of the families are choosing the choice in the choice zone. 8 out of 10 families are choosing to stay close to home. So this is what we have done for 50 years. 8 out of 10 families want to stay close to home, and we have not allowed them to do that. Now, it's about 40% at the high school, which I expected. I think families are more comfortable with saying, I'm okay with my teenager leaving the community if that's what they want to do. So it's 80, 80, and 40 right now are the numbers. So yes, that's what the families want. So we've been successful in outreach. Now, which is the harder part, is making sure we are successful in funding and support of our choice zone schools. And I will tell you this, the budget we are proposing now to fund our schools with a racial equity formula is second to none. I would put it up against any in the district, to the point along with our Mackenzie Scott money, to provide supplementary funds to our choice zone and AIS schools. Supplementary funds means next year, we're just going to give these schools a pot of money that is, instead of, PTA money, athletic money. And I'll give an example. The male manual football game this year the gate was $80,000. They sold $80,000 worth of tickets. Each school, after expenses, took home $35,000. They get to reinvest that into their students, whether that's athletics, they get to reinvest that. On that same night, the gate at the Shawnee home football game was $800. After you take out expenses, they lost money. And so PTA, we're going to put every parent in the PTA and we're going to pay it. We're going to pay it through the Mackenzie Scott funds. We're going to give additional funds. And we've hired Jamira Johnson, our director of Choice Zone Support, whose sole job, I told her, I empowered her. Your job is to make sure teachers, the principals, schools have everything they need. And I said, I don't want you I want you pushing. Why don't we have better posters on the wall? Why don't we have branding in the school? Why don't we have brand new football helmets? Because that's what we have to have. For the first time ever in August of 23, we are paying teachers $8,000 more a year to teach in the Choice Zone. There is a lot of discussion and talk about that. We are paying principals $10,000 more to work in the Choice Zone. And so we definitely and clearly have an interest in kids staying close to home. We also have a record number of applications to magnet schools out of the Choice Zone because we went down there and asked families and didn't just say, which one do you want? Do you want the Choice Zone or do you want outside the Choice Zone? We also said, what about these magnets? We got a great middle school magnet at Shawnee for STEM. We've got Western Middle School's Performing Art magnet. We've got other magnets you can apply for. Record number of West Louisville kids applying for magnets. So it's an exciting time. I think it is going to make a huge difference when it comes to equity in our district and outcomes for kids. We are tackling this year, I'll say this facility-wise, in August, we'll be opening up our brand new school in West Louisville, soon to name that school. We are close to purchasing, and we'll make an announcement in the next couple of months of where our new middle school is going to be built, which I think is going to be a very exciting announcement as well. So things are moving quickly, and it's very exciting. The next big thing for the spring for us is start times for schools. Right now what we have is 2 start times for schools. We have a serious attendance issues because we're having our adolescents and teenagers have to start school at 7:40 a.m. It's not healthy for kids. So right now, and it hurts we have transportation issues. So we're going to have about 10 different start times. And what we are trying to move is our high needs kids, predominantly our schools that are significant schools of color and poverty, back an hour in middle and high school to an 8:30 start time so we can improve attendance. Now, I will say this, somebody has to go early. Like we've got a 7:30 to 9:30 window to get kids in school. We've got about a 2:30 to 5 o'clock to get kids home. That's it. So it will be early, but research shows elementary kids can go earlier. And especially we're looking at kids that choose to go to magnets. If you choose to go to a magnet school, you may have to go earlier. If you are going to your reside school, if you are in a high poverty school, our goal is to get you in a little bit later so that we can improve attendance, we can improve mental health and the health of kids. Ideally, we would have everyone go later, but that's not an opportunity we have when it comes to transportation. So lots going on right now when it comes to racial equity and the work that we're doing, but I'm really excited about it. Excited about the future state and the plans that we have going right now. So I'll wrap up here and happy to take any questions on that or anything else that you have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Polio. It's just sitting here listening to you talk about some of the things that we have going on now. It's amazing. 5 years, not even 5 years, but 5 years after the voting of the racial equity policy is when you think about it, it's like, wow, it's a lot of it's taking place. And not only that, but what I observed is too, our ability to make the adjustment. Because I don't think we were there 5 years ago.
Right.
to make the adjustment. When we identified some challenges, it wasn't necessarily always the huge motivation to bring the solution, but nevertheless, we'll go ahead and get questions in. If you could, please, on the Zoom, if you could raise your hand first, and we'll go by that. And then in the room, if you could just raise your hand, whoever wants to go next. And please remember, if you could just introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
All right, no questions. Thanks, guys.
I was waiting on the screen. You can go.
All right, I'm gonna.
Go ahead, Kumar.
All right, cool. Well,
Who are you?
my name is Kumar Rashad, high school math teacher, Breckenridge Metropolitan High School. And Dr. Polio, just a couple clarifying things about the moving back an hour. Are we putting alternative schools in that category of high needs kids, Breckenridge Metro, for example?
Yeah, so right now, and I'll say this, I don't, just being very candid with you. We have, just so everyone knows, the work to get this done is well beyond the capability we have here. So there's some consulting companies that have done this for Miami and Atlanta and other cities out of MIT. They're working on it now for us. They have given us kind of a skeleton version of the plan, which is high schools will go here and here and here. Our high needs will go here. I haven't got the list of schools yet. They're cleaning that up, giving us numbers. My goal is, yes, to have clearly, I would say our high needs kids are in our alternative schools. So our goal would have them start later as well. I can't 100% say when that'll be yet, because we should have a plan out to the public in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but it's kind of tightening it up right now.
Okay. One follow-up. Okay, follow-up.
Let me ask you, do you believe that those schools should be starting later?
Yes, our attendance is affected. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I felt like that was the case, yes.
Okay, and to that, additional to that point, you spoke about the choice zones, and of course, alternative schools aren't part of choice zones, so there's not that opportunity to get any type of extra pay for that. But is there any talks about alternative schools and being as far as their high needs areas and being put on the table for any type of extra incentive?
Yeah, so I've had multiple conversations with Brent McKim about it, who has been a proponent of it, and heard from members about that. Here is the challenge we face. There is, when we do this and say, so first of all, raising pay for all teachers, and then you differentiate for high needs, hard to staff schools. Our alternative schools are that. At some point, though, you're drawing a line to say, okay, these schools are and these schools aren't. And so the hard part for us is the wide array of special schools we have, alternative schools that we have, that include state agency schools, Churchill Park, Benet, Waller Williams, Liberty, Breck, Minor Daniel, and I could go through, Western Day, all of these things. And so having a clear understanding of who is the yes and who is not the yes, I guess, is who gets the extra and who doesn't. So I clearly believe that, high needs, hard to staff schools like the one you teach at should be considered for this. We are just trying to wrap our arms around where we put that line. So I think you'll hear more about it in the near future.
All right, we have Mr. Gunn on the line, and then next we have Ms. Faye Owens. Mr. Gunn, if you can introduce yourself and unmute, please.
This is Kevin Gunn, Youth Services Center Coordinator at Olmsted Academy North. Dr. Polio, what are some of the other cities/districts that are already implementing this new or these time changes?
So first and foremost, I will say this: we are the only city that I can find in the United States, large district, that has only 2 start times, K through 12. We do have an early childhood start time. that's a little bit later. But right now, and typical of JCPS for the past 50 years, it has been almost all 7:40 middle and high school, 9 o'clock elementary schools. And so what that means is we have right now 725 bus routes and 650 bus drivers. And so the 650 bus drivers go out and pick up all the routes that are theirs, drop the kids off at school, go back and pick up the other 75 that were uncovered. And that's that list of late buses that are now arriving at school after, so missing instructional time. Then the 650 bus drivers go pick up all the elementary routes and do the same thing again, where they have to go pick up and bring kids late to school. They do the same thing in the afternoon. And so we have kids staying later in school because the buses are making second and third runs. Most districts, if not all districts, are in the United States, have 10, 11, 12 start times and multiple fleets of bus drivers. And so you may have a 7:40 start time, an 8, an 8:20, an 8:40, a 9, and 9:20. And it's quite possible that Olmsted North could be a different start time than Lassiter Middle School. But it's all dependent upon using fleets of bus drivers to get them there. And so there are several states that have actually banned legally starting school before 8 a.m. for middle and high school students. California is one of those. But there are a significant number of states that have done it. But we may be the only district who has 2 start times that I can find anywhere. We are the most accommodating district when it comes to transportation. We transport nearly every kid to whatever school they want to go to, they choose to go to. And we have the shortest walk time for bus stops. Our average bus stop for all of our kids is 0.14 miles from their front door. Most large districts, it's about 1.5 miles for high school, 1 mile for middle, and then about 0.5 mile for elementary school. What that means is we are providing nearly door-to-door service for our kids across the district. So we are going to extend the walk to bus stops with the exception of the Choice Zone and the Newburgh area. Everyone else is going to have to go a little bit farther to get to their bus stop. And then we are going to add the start times. We are getting down to 600 bus routes with 650 bus drivers so that we can solve our transportation issues as well as having our kids start a little bit later.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fay? Ms. Fay, if you could unmute. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment first before I ask my question. Dr. Polio, I was really surprised to see how many middle school parents chose to go to the new middle school that's not even built. They don't even know where it's going to be. It was like surprising to me, and I think that's a good thing. I am concerned about the achievement in reading and math scores in the district, but especially in the choice zones. You just stated that there's a new curriculum. Could you expand on that, the method that what reading method are you going to be using?
Sure, be happy to. First and foremost, I think, and I'll say this, we have to make some determinations as a district, how focused we want to be on test scores. I really believe that. My guess is this committee would disagree pretty wholeheartedly across members as to how much we should focus on standardized test scores. And so that is a major problem in our district and across the nation. Is our test scores something that should be a focus or should they not be a focus? So that's my first thing I want to say. However, I do believe more importantly than test scores, that curriculum is the most important. And I think early literacy is extremely important. So our choice zone right now for next year has adopted EL curriculum expeditionary learning. I believe that's what we will be choosing as an entire district. It is a curriculum for early literacy that is very appropriate for racial equity first and foremost. Second of all, it is a strong balance between all 5 components of effective literacy. That includes phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, and I'm sorry, I don't have the other 2 on the top of my head right now. But all 5 areas, it has significant time. So it does address the concerns about not focusing enough on phonics, because it has a clear amount of time that should be focused on that area, along with the comprehension area. So very pleased with that. I think that will be across the district. We can begin to teach. We are also going to be releasing a clear, because we hear a lot of things about, well, the district supports this, but not that. We are going to have, with our new chief academic officer, a very clear white paper, so to speak, about our belief on how early literacy should be taught. And it's not just our belief, it's based upon research. How much time should be spent? Certain kids need more attention on phonics than other kids. And so, you may have a kid who is, well beyond phonics and is ready to move on to other areas and doesn't need that. You have some kids who may need more of it. That's probably the hardest part of teaching, is differentiation when you have 25 kids sitting in front of you. But I think having one curriculum across the district that clearly outlines the type of instruction that occurs, whether it's literacy or math, is fundamental. So that's what we will be doing, Ms. Owens.
Well, let me ask you this. From listening to you, it sounds like they're going to be teaching phonics by itself and then comprehension. Phonics, well, okay, I'm an age teacher, okay? Phonics, when I was taught how to teach reading, you did not pull phonics out by itself. It was included with the comprehension, and when you started new stories, they introduced the words and they did the phonics right then. It's not, I do not believe that phonics should be taught by itself. It should be in connection with whatever story you're reading, what the new words are. Because if you teach it by itself, they're just gonna be sounding out words. But if you do it while you're teaching the comprehension, the story, main idea, whatever, it makes more sense to me. Now, I was wondering, what are your feelings about the methods that are being used in Mississippi? I was amazed that their test scores were higher than ours. Now, I'm not one who wants to teach the test. I want kids to know how to read and know how to unlock words. So are they going to use are they going to use?
I'd be happy to share my feelings on Mississippi. So yes, Mississippi has high NAEP scores for the 4th grade, and they've seen growth. Part of that is a state law that holds back any kid that is not on proficiency at the end of 3rd grade. So the 4th grade NAEP test is taken by many kids who are struggling, who are actually 5th graders developmentally. And then interestingly enough, if you go ahead and look at Mississippi's 8th grade NAEP scores, they are way below Kentucky's. And so my question is, what happens in Mississippi between 4th and 8th grade? Because some reason it falls off. Well, I'll tell you what happens is, first of all of those kids now have to continue on to become 8th graders. Second of all, when you have a heavy focus on phonics only, which Mississippi has, what happens is a lower level of reading comprehension is needed to answer questions on the NAEP in 4th grade. As you get into middle school and high school, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, comprehension text goes way up and requires much greater, that skill of comprehension. So I would ask you to go look at Mississippi's 8th grade scores on the NAEP and see where they sit. They're not good. They're way below Kentucky's. So clearly it is a combination of both phonics and comprehension in order for kids to be successful long-term.
Also, I was wondering, for middle school and high school, teachers need to be taught how to teach those content teachers, how to teach reading in the content. That's where the problem is. Now, I don't know all the details about Mississippi, but I do know that if you combine phonics with the rest of the reading skills, it will improve. And I do believe in small groups because, as you said, each class has 3 or 4 different groups of kids of ability. So I will be interested in hearing more about the curriculum at a different time.
Danae, can you give an elevator speech on the curriculum? Because you're a principal, elementary principal, so tell us what you think.
Yes, so Ms. Faye, it's exactly what you were saying. It is integrated into the shared reading curriculum. It's not guided reading. It is part of the shared reading. So when you do your whole group lesson, all of the phonics, phonemic awareness, and all of those things are associated with the story. And within that story, you're teaching phonetic concepts. And so it is embedded in that curriculum. And then the guided reading is separate, writing is separate. So you would still have small group guided reading that's differentiated according to their instructional level for reading. But the whole group is what the EL program is, and it drills down and is very detailed with the lessons. And it almost gives too much for the teacher, and the teacher is able to pull what is needed exactly for their students.
Their children.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to see that. Maybe one day I can come visit your school and
Yes, ma'am, anytime.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
All right, we got another question from Ms. Phyllis Clark.
Hi, Ms. Clark.
Hello, everyone. How are you all?
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. I hope I can be heard okay. This is my first time operating this way. I appreciate the technology. So thank you, Dr. Polio, for letting us ask these questions. My question is related to teacher recruitment. And what's interesting about this, I almost didn't want to bring this up, but it was until I heard my own sophomore have a conversation with friends around Black teacher recruitment. And the conversation went something like, you know, I can't wait to see more Black teachers behind the desk teaching me about me instead of maybe, you know, walking in the hallway or seeing me in the cafeteria, you know, all these examples, but it wasn't behind the desk. They were emphasizing seeing Black teachers in their classrooms. And so while I won't mention what school she goes to, it was just really poignant for me to hear sophomores talking about their expectations around, you know, teachers that look like them in their classrooms. And so can you speak to, I know there have been recent developments around partnerships with Simmons College and UK and Simmons and U of L and some other things. Can you speak to any of that for us and tell us what you think is coming up or is happening by way of teacher recruitment specifically for Black teachers?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I'll say one of the scariest propositions that we have in our industry and for our nation is the lack of all people going into the teaching profession. The amount of folks coming out of post-secondary institutions with a certification has declined about 60% nationally in the past 20 years. I mean, you think about that. That is, so we have people retiring, leaving the profession with half of the numbers to replace them. And so, you know, I had a press conference with the governor yesterday about all teachers. And, you know, it is a really scary proposition 10 years from now. Having said that as well, ensuring that we've been very successful when it comes to administrators of color representing our student population. We are nowhere near where we need to be in teachers, which is one of our goals in the racial equity plan. You know, we have gone up 2 or 3 percentage points, but we are still hovering below 20% of our teacher population are Black teachers, knowing that close to 40% of our student population are Black students. So we've got to double the amount of teachers we have in our district for it to reflect. So, you know, it is a multi-pronged approach. Some of it is us, some of it is, and I challenge our universities. You know, what are they doing to get more students of color into our post-secondary certification programs? And I think we all have to keep pushing them. Because right now, when a Black student comes out of a post-secondary program with a certification, they essentially can go teach anywhere they want to teach. Because they, you know, right now, teachers are a hot commodity and all districts are looking for teachers of color. Having said that, I will say this, out of the DEP department, one of the huge successes we have had is our teacher residency program. I will give U of L some credit for that, give them some credit. I will give the vast majority of that to JCPS and DEP for the work on that. We have had now about, I think the last number, about 75 candidates in the past 2 years come through, with about 50% of them being teachers of color. DEP came to me, Dr. Marshall and Selena Fishback came to me recently and said, we would like to have that number to 50 next year. And so we are putting the money, it is a very expensive program. We spend about $1 million a year to get near about 30 teachers certified. But they have a 97% retention rate of those teachers. And I think that is immense because we're training them inside the classroom in our high need schools. We're going to work to get 50 next year. My goal is to continue to expand that until we get to 100 every year that we are providing certifications to, with 50% of those being teachers of color. And so, you know, I think that is work that no one else is doing. We are now looking to what is called option 9, where we pay for our young people in our high school programs to go into a 3-year college program to get certified. We'll put them in classrooms as college students and pay them. You're an assistant in the class, getting your field hours out there, but you're also now, that's the program that's coming next, followed by a program with post-secondary for folks who don't have a bachelor's degree. They passed high school, they don't have a bachelor's degree. We will get their certification in teaching. So DEP is going to actually have 3 programs running simultaneously that are going to have high school students, high school graduates who don't have their bachelor's degrees, and bachelor's degrees who don't have their certification. So I think we're going to have the most comprehensive approach to hiring teachers. But I'll be honest, Ms. Clark, it's an uphill battle for years to come.
May I make a comment about that, Dr. Polio? One of my questions that I was going to ask, it was like a vision of mine, and I'm glad to see that you really are in the process of doing it. My vision was if JCPS could create a partnership with surrounding universities with students, not the ACES program, but with students who could come in as paraprofessionals to help make the classroom smaller. So what you're saying sounds similar to that. And I'm glad to see that y'all are going in that route, because I think with smaller classes, the discipline would not be so extreme. So I congratulate you on that idea.
I agree with you, Ms. Owens. I think that's a great idea. I don't think, with the teacher shortage, it's going to be difficult to just have 20 kids in a classroom with one teacher. But what you can have is 26 kids with 2 adults in the classroom, which may make
that would be great.
So I agree with you.
The idea.
All right, we got another question. Just want to remind, council members, if you, wondering, or thinking about questions you can ask, I resubmitted, what the group sent in. So if you check your email, you can see what's been asked, and what hasn't been asked. But right now we got, council member, Ms. Walker.
Hello, Tyra Walker. I was trying to find my notes, but I couldn't find them, and I thought of it right when Ms. Fay was speaking. But I know that we have and thank you for that relationship and collaborating with the universities and trying to get more teachers. But what about social workers? Because we have a lot of children and families that are dealing with a lot of trauma today. And just to get more social workers, mental health counselors into the building, is there any way, and I know it's gonna cost a lot, but to also work with universities to possibly them doing a residency as well?
Yeah, I think, and I'll be honest, that's not my expertise, you know, when we get into social work and mental health. And so we've talked about that shortage. That shortage is very acute. I'll give you an example. When we added mental health professional to every school, and next year for the first year, where there'll be a mental health professional in every school. Elementaries won't be splitting them, schools won't be splitting them. It will be in every single school. But our partners that provide mental health were not pleased with us for that, because it's 155 mental health professionals that we took. And so unfortunately, the pool's pretty empty right now. But I think that's a good thought that I need to look into and get our teams looking into. I will tell you, with mental health, we are, you know, because we hear a lot about the mental health crisis. And, you know, for me, I just couldn't say, well, we're not going to do anything about it. Yes, it's going to add things onto the plate of our schools, but here are two things we are doing. Number one, all of our middle and high schools will be having a mental health screener in the next 5 weeks. It's not perfect, but it's about a 30-question survey question online that all students will take, that essentially will give information to the mental health professional and the counselors at the school to say, we might have a concern about a student. We are also implementing it's not a program, but there's a company called Care Solace. And what Care Solace does, it's a company that brings together on software program all of the mental health professionals in the city. And if a counselor or a mental health professional is sitting with a student and they know there may be a need, they can then have that student's insurance or no insurance and find a connection for that student to a mental health professional in the community, and actually set up an appointment with the parent and the child, and then track that. So a counselor can say, they won't say what happened in the meeting, but the counselor will say, parent and student showed up, received counseling. And it is a 24/7 service and hotline for students and for our employees and their adults and their families to get assistance. So you are right, getting people in school is a big challenge for us in that area, but we are looking into some alternative means to support as well.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I think it's personally, I think it's not only a either or thing, but I think it's a both and thing.
Yep.
We not only need the people in the school buildings, but we still need our partners as well, because I'm actually seeing examples, because we have someone in the building, they're actually able to utilize their network and refer not only students, but students and families to our partners. And I think we should continue to build those relationships with those in the community that can support, especially that has that cultural awareness piece to go along with that. So got another question.
Ben Johnson, I'm the chair here of the advisory council. I have two questions. I'm gonna combine them. You can answer them separately if it makes sense. So
Okay.
we've heard about all of the choices of the parents choosing, particularly for the younger students, to go to the schools close. What's being done to ensure that the quality of the education is going to be what it needs to be? And then I had as a separate question, what plan is in place to monitor the accountability of how these choice zone dollars are being spent? If I heard you correctly, you're saying that the schools are giving allocations and they can do what they think is best. What's the accountability for that, for that process?
Yeah, so first and foremost, on the quality education. First, without a doubt, the number one influencer that we can have on schools is funding. I mean, that is the number one thing I can do, is make sure the funding is there where it is needed. We haven't done it right for 50 years. For the first time ever, I believe this, and maybe the only district nationally, our schools in the choice zone will have absolute unlimited resources to get what they need to be successful. The second thing is staffing, getting quality staffing. I believe the $8,000 is going to make a huge difference in teachers saying, I want to come, and principals, I want to come work. Now, I mean, when you're a teacher and making $55,000 or $60,000 a year, it's too low, no doubt. But $8,000 is a big chunk of money. And that is a difference maker for many teachers. Not all teachers, we only want the ones that want to be there, but that gives a choice to the principal to say that, along with an aligned curriculum. Secondly, the resources of people will be greater in our schools than ever before. I believe in schools that, the amount of people you have in schools matter. The adults in classroom, the adults in hallways, the adults in cafeterias that are talking positively, that matters. And so I believe we are touching all of the points that are going to be needed, to make successful, well, let me say, completely close the opportunity gap. And now, so achievement in the long run, that's where we want to be, but closing that opportunity gap is the linchpin that I can make. When it comes to accountability, first of all, Jamira Johnson is the director of Choice Zone Support. She has complete access to how they're spending money, and she is a direct report to me, which outside of chiefs, I hardly have anyone who is a direct report to me. So met with her today. She has complete access to me to walk to my secretary and say, I need 30 minutes with Dr. Polio tomorrow. And she can get it on there and come say, so-and-so school doesn't have this, or have you seen their football field? Or did you know that they don't have enough textbooks? And she told me today, met with all the principals. The one thing that they need right now are more cameras in their schools in the choice zone. And I said, all right, you go to the principals. I said, I want you to canvass all 13. You tell me how many cameras we need for it to be fully operational and everything. And I said, come back to me, tell me it's done. We'll get it done. She said they want branding in their schools. So there's, they just don't feel like the branding of the school is like that JCPS logo, but do it. And I said, all right, you go to the schools, you canvass how many of them want branding with signage and logos and all, and bring it back to me and it's done. Those are the low hanging fruit that we can do right away. Also on top of that, we'll be forming before the start of the year, like this racial equity committee, a committee of external and internal folks that will be reporting to our Board of Education and having quarterly meetings, just like you do, to look at the funding of our choice zone schools, the outcomes of our choice zone schools. So this will be an accountability committee that will be monitoring those, how money is spent, how this is doing, do schools have what they need?
Cool. All right, well, I'll say real quick, the branding is a great opportunity for student engagement. The students are there, so I think that's some low hanging fruit. And a separate question, as these new schools are coming online and some other schools are being combined or what have you, what's the plan for the buildings that are no longer being used? Schools that are being combined, what have you, in communities, there's nothing worse than abandoned, empty property, which becomes abandoned property, which can become an eyesore, which can become a magnet. So are there any plans for?
Yeah, so right now, the only one we will have in West Louisville in the choice zone will be Wheatley Elementary. It will be a swing space for us.
Okay.
So as we build schools what we found is you got to have swing spaces to, if schools aren't ready or you need a year in a building with here, it will be, so there will be kids and people and teachers in that building for the near future. Now, at some point, and we are going to invest significant dollars to improve that facility, lighting, those type of things, branding. But at some point, we're gonna have to do something different with that. And so if we keep it, eventually we'll have to tear it down and rebuild it if we decide there is some kind of need for it. But the last thing we want to do is abandon, and we will not just abandon it and leave it an empty building.
All right, the next questions, we got, Eva online, and then, in the room, we have, Terrence, who would, have a question. So you can go next, Eva.
Thank you, Dr. Juan. Hi, Dr. Polio. My name is Eva Melissa. I work with La Casita Center. It's a nonprofit that works with the immigrant and the Latinx community here in Louisville. I think my question, I'm sorry?
Did I know it well? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Dr. Polio. I guess mine is between a question and maybe even a request. I think I would like to, for this group to meet the people who does the strategies for outreach when we're talking about recruitment, because I think that's something that I would like to also just be aware as a member of the community. It is to see if the outreach that they are utilizing are really reaching the multicultural communities that we have here in Louisville, especially just the platforms, since those are also culturally relevant for the communities that we have that are multilingual and multicultural. And another thing that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it is about the outreach or survey conducted by the parent outreach team. I don't know if there is any way that we can see the data. I'm interested in demographics, just to see if families who responded are also reflective of the immigrant and refugee community expressing their voices in whether we're interested on the school zone choice.
Yeah, I think we can get that. I think we can easily get that to you. I know they did at least one event that was representative of immigrant population, and that we had translators available, and making sure to translate our choice books and all the things we do for outreach when it comes to student assignment, that we do them in the languages of our students. I would say that you are absolutely correct. We'll get those to you. One of the challenges we continue to face, as you probably know, we've had significant growth in English second language students in JCPS this year. We're close to 16,000 English second language students, and somewhere near a quarter of our kindergarten students are English second language students. So this is a growing need that we address, that population significantly and continue to do outreach. So we will get you that, and I can wholeheartedly agree with you.
And would it be possible to meet the team that does the outreach for recruiting, just to understand a little bit of the strategies that they use to reach their communities?
100%. I will make sure that they reach out to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for the time. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so Terrence Sullivan.
I reach you all the time.
I just had a question about the committee you just mentioned, that with the funding and with the board, and if I do think that it would make sense to have some crossover with this group representing that other group, just making sure that funding piece is also looking at the same types of things that we would be mindful of. And so I was just curious about who is setting that, naming that committee, and then if there's any discussion of having crossover with this group here.
Yeah, so we're in the process of putting that, and really, this is the model we wanted to use. So this committee and how it was formed is the model in which we want to do it, which is not me sitting up saying who needs to, that there were representatives from, I think that's how we did it, Delquan, that we had a variety of representative groups who named their person. So it wasn't us saying like, oh, let's get that person and that person. So we plan on using the same thing. I think there very well could be crossover. Obviously, we don't want to burden people to have too many meetings, but we want to have crossover. And I'll be honest, I think at least once a year, it would be beneficial for both to have a joint committee meeting at the same time where that committee reports to this one and vice versa, but there can easily be crossover. So we're expecting the same process, and we should be naming that in the next couple of months.
Back on board.
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. All right, cool. Good.
Kumar has a long list over there.
I believe it. And I'm glad that answered some questions. I really forgot what I really wanted to ask in the first place. Thank you, brother. We got Dr. Kumar Rashad again, JCTI. We were looking at old student surveys, well, I guess more recent student surveys, and found that the biggest disparity, I feel that the biggest disparity is that Black students don't feel that they're treated or disciplined fairly. I think that's, it's evidenced by my school being an alternative school being 90% Black, and those who try to go through an appeals process who feel that they're improperly placed there are more likely going to be denied. And I think as a teacher, I think that teachers and employees of color are also disproportionately disciplined, harsher than others. So, going into this new era, and we got new choice zones and new schools, but we still got some of these same old issues. What procedures or policies or what ideas do you think that we could have in order to have fair representation of when people are making transition or doing the discipline practices, or I guess more racial training, perhaps to make sure that leaders are being conscious of how many of each type of person that they are disciplined.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you on the student disproportionality. I don't have that data on, I've asked for it when I met, I haven't quite gotten yet on the data on the staff disproportionality. I'm looking forward to getting to that and digging into it. So to see if that is accurate, and that's the case. We do have on where we do discipline from the district, we do have an EPRC committee that is well represented and racially balanced. However, that doesn't mean that it's not the case. So, or at the school level, that doesn't rise to the district level, that could be the case as well. So we're gathering that data so that we can hope to provide that to you at a future meeting. When it comes to students, I'm going to be, very candid with you here. There is disproportionality, and I think one of the things we heard from our candidate that will be CAO, it's all about adult actions and adult beliefs. I think it was pretty clear that adults have to change their beliefs and belief systems when it comes to disciplining of students. And that's a hard thing to do. And so I can come to the JCTA board of directors and I have one half of the room telling me we're not disciplining enough. You need to suspend more. You need to do this more. Okay, I can do that, but what that's going to lead is to further disproportionality. And then the other side of the room might be like yourself, might be saying we're disproportionate. We're really, as a district, going to have to, and I don't know, I mean, it's a tall task. We're really going to have to come to some understanding together of, what does discipline mean? What should be in the toolbox box for discipline? What should be suspended? What shouldn't be suspended? These things that are difficult questions to deal with because people have a belief system around discipline and punishment, and that, I could go on and on. But it's one of the most challenging things for me as a superintendent is, you hear the outcry of discipline and okay, what does that mean? What do we have at our disposal for disciplinary measure? Not everything, discipline is something that is meant to change behavior. All right, it's not just to say you do the time. In school, it is meant to change behavior. And so what do we have when we have that? We have conference with the student. We have conference with the parent. We have detention. We have lunch detention, after school detention, whatever you want. Saturday school. We have in-school suspension and we have suspension. Not a lot of whole other options when you talk to discipline right there. Unfortunately, most of those are pulling kids out of the classroom, which disproportionately impacts students of color. And so there is no doubt about it. But what I think it takes more than anything is, first of all, addressing that bias that may be, and I've told this story before. I think back to myself, Kumar, as a principal at J-Town when I first got there, and I was the new sheriff in town. And I was told, got to clean up the school day. And I was the right guy to do this. And in my mind, it doesn't matter to me if it was a white or a black student. But if it was in the hallway during class and a black student was walking towards me, that, my voice may have been harsher to them about where's your hall pass than the white student who had the backpack on, who looked a different way. I would have said, where's your pass, no matter what, but I bet my tone was different, which led to that student saying something back to me and me saying, you're not going to talk to me like that. Yes, all right, you're suspended. And that's what leads to disproportionate outcomes. And I think that takes reflection that just goes beyond, okay, let's not suspend and let's do, and we have some principals who do it fantastic. They lead their schools to do it, and introspection. It's not just saying don't suspend. It's not just saying don't discipline, because what you're trying to do is prevent the behaviors from happening.
Restorative justice.
And that requires restorative justice. That requires, folks who are willing to say, okay, it's not personal. This is not about me. They called me a name. It's not about me. I'm done. And so we got a lot of work to do there. We got a whole lot of work to do there around changing hearts, changing minds, and coming to some understanding about what it means to discipline. So I don't know if that's an exact answer for you, but we got to have a whole lot more discussions about it and what matters.
And including restorative justice, like you said, ramping that up a little bit more in the process.
And providing those supports. I agree with you.
All right. Anyone else in the room or online have any questions? I think Ms. Fay, I think you put something in the chat. I'm sorry.
She liked my discipline answer.
I think it was what I had asked anyway.
Oh, it was,
That's what
okay.
it looked like.
Okay, yeah, okay. All right, well, if there are not any, there are no more questions. We want to thank Dr. Polio. You are no longer on the hot seat.
Thank you, guys.
But
Enjoyed spending time with you.
yeah, but before you go, just appreciate your support and your courage and bravery, because I know it's not easy, especially being a former principal and the relationships you have to push folks up, but also being an ear. But as far as ACRE goes, we are made up of folks inside of JCPS and out in the community. Based on especially those areas where you said we have a lot of work to do, are there any things that come to mind where a council like this can be part of the solution to helping JCPS move forward?
Yeah, I do. I think what I just talked about, I mean, that's getting messy when it's like, rolling up your sleeves and saying, all right, how do we deal with, how do we truly deal with disproportionality and discipline? How do, not just saying, all right, don't put the numbers in the books or don't say, but how do we truly deal with this and wrestle with this? How can we go to, as a group here, the board of directors at JCTA, the board of education at JCPS, other groups, and say, let's talk about how we do this. And yeah, you might believe that, but that may lead to disproportionality as well. Making kids wear name tag badges, and if they don't have their badge on, they're those type of things may lead to that kind of problem. So, I think that's a real issue that can be, roll up our sleeves and make some recommendations, because that helps me when I go out and say, yeah, ACRE, these were recommendations provided to us by ACRE that we can do. So, that may be something that would really, anything that you all provide support to, provide your endorsement to, provide a recommendation to, it provides me the opportunity to say that, that's not me coming up with this. This is our racial equity committee making these recommendations. So, that's something that I would really consider thinking about.
I'm not even sure if you can do it, but it will be interesting to see if there is a pattern in terms of discipline relative to age of the teacher and or tenure. Because you have some old school mindsets, and it will be interesting to see, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's going to be a tough nut to crack in terms of trying to to tell somebody that they're biased, but they don't think they're biased because that's just how they are or how they've been. It will be interesting to see if there's sort of a generational difference, because hopefully there is, because that could be easier to address, just looking for some potential solution.
And I want to be clear, there are things that require discipline in schools.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there are things that require discipline. We all know that, and I don't want to shy away from that. And I want to be clear when I say that, yes, these things require discipline in schools and consequences for students.
Absolutely.
However, on the other side of it, that I just told the story, things that build and lead to these things happening are sometimes not what's seen.
Right.
And so, a student, breaking down, cursing a teacher, if we get to the root cause and say, yeah, that's inappropriate to do that. But sometimes it was the actions that led to that.
Right.
And so let's take care of that. Or it's something else that's happening to a child somewhere else. And this is just a manifestation of that problem. I'll see kindergartners do things. Clearly, they're not doing that because they've decided, I just want to go be a jerk today in school. There's other things going on. And so, but we've got to deal with those things. So, I really do think that could be a quality task of this committee.
All right, we appreciate it. We about to wrap up the public part of our meeting. I wanted to give our Chief Equity Officer, Dr. John Marshall, a chance to say some last words, if you like.
Oh, no, just wanted to thank you all, and someone back channel, they wanted to know the unfamiliar name, Telma Hogan, that is my executive secretary. She's taking meeting notes as well. So she's not a member of the committee, but when we have meetings like this in 2023, I want her to attend, to take notes, to do exactly what you all just said, to make sure I'm doing my part to follow back up with the things that are said to move the work forward. So Telma Hogan, a lot of y'all know Telma.
Yeah. And also on the line, we also have Dr. Muldrow, who's with University of Louisville, as well as Ms. Wright, who is our Deputy Assistant General Counsel with JCPS. So we appreciate council members and we appreciate Dr. Polio being here. Please be on the lookout for all those in the community who are watching. We will have another meeting coming up on March the 16th. And we will be sharing that information as well. And for those who did not get to participate, we will have this on our social media pages and platforms for JCPS Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Department. So appreciate you all, and please stay engaged. Thank you.